It wasn't the eerie silence that struck me first, but the unmistakable feeling that we weren't alone. We were on a school camping trip, me and a group of 8 other students, venturing deep into the jungle for a week-long adventure. The kind of thing you read about in travel blogs, where you disconnect from the world and rediscover your primal instincts. But what we didn't know was that the jungle was far more dangerous than the teacher who warned us about poisonous plants and animals. Something else lingered in that thick, suffocating air, something not easily explained. We had been walking for hours that day, the jungle thick with vines and humid air, our backpacks heavy with supplies, the sweat on our faces mixed with the dirt we had accumulated from the long trek. Everyone was eager to get to the campsite, tired, but still full of energy, laughing at jokes that barely made sense, until we stumbled upon it. The jungle around us was teeming with life, thick, earthy, humid, but inside the cabin there was nothing. The air was stale, as though it hadn't been disturbed for years. The cabin stood at the edge of a clearing, half hidden by the dense foliage, its wooden walls warped and cracked. She was the type of person who found everything a little spooky, and her voice betrayed just a hint of unease. At first, we thought it was some sort of abandoned shelter, maybe left over from an old logging camp, or a hut built by explorers long gone. It's shelter, and we're pretty far from camp. Everyone else seemed fine, though. They were already settling down, taking off their backpacks, and starting to unpack their sleeping bags. The sounds of the jungle chirping insects, distant howls only, amplified the sensation that we were being watched. I tried to push the feeling away, telling myself I was just paranoid, that it was just the isolation. But it wasn't just that. Something was off. It was like the jungle itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. We weren't exactly prepared to be picking up strange remnants of the past, but something about the cabin caught our attention. The leaves barely moved. The sound came again, closer this time, from inside the cabin. They were black and white, grainy, showing people I didn't recognize. But what struck me most was the way they were arranged, almost too deliberately. The photos depicted people in front of this very cabin, but each one seemed slightly off. But I felt it. The air around us seemed to grow colder, the shadows darker. My eyes kept darting back toward the cabin, where the darkened doorway seemed to be staring back at me. They were already too busy settling in for the night. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a scream. Then, as quickly as the scream had started, it stopped. It wasn't loud, not at first, but it was enough to send a jolt of terror straight through me. The kind of scream that echoes in your bones, making every part of you tense up. But even the laughter felt strained. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "I'll go check it out," he said, not bothering to ask anyone if they wanted to come. He had this weird, almost reckless confidence about him. Their faces were blurred, as if the camera had never quite caught them right. Maybe it was the sense of mystery it radiated, or maybe it was the strange, unsettling aura it gave off. It was Jack, the braver one in our group, who pushed the door open first. "We need to go back to camp now," she hissed. The rusted hinges screamed as they moved, the sound slicing through the stillness like a warning. We all froze for a second, the kind of moment where everyone looks at each other and wonders if they should turn around, thick with something unexplainable, something that felt ancient and wrong. And there, in the far corner, I noticed something, just a hint of movement, but we didn't. We walked in. I knew she was, but as I took another step forward, it turned. Its eyes met mine, but they weren't eyes like anyone I had ever seen. They were hollow, empty, like black pits that swallowed everything. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, but still, I couldn't leave him behind. Not like this. The inside was dark, the only light coming from the small slivers of sunshine that managed to pierce through the jungle canopy above. Dust floated lazily in the air, settling on every surface, and old furniture lay scattered around. An overturned table, a broken chair, and what looked like the remains of a wooden cot. It seemed so abandoned. But then again, it didn't feel completely empty. Too heavy, too slow, like someone or something was pacing inside. I still see those empty eyes staring back at me, and I know it's still out there, waiting for someone else to stumble upon that cabin in the jungle. I noticed something strange right away. There was no smell. "Should we stay here for the night?" Emily asked, glancing around. Jack, ever the confident one, shrugged. "Why not?" I wasn't sure. Something about the cabin felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. As I looked around, I realized that there were old, faded photographs pinned to the wall near the back. "Anyone else feel like this place is a little weird?" I muttered to no one in particular, but no one responded. By dusk, we had a fire going outside the cabin, the flames flickering wildly in the cool jungle air. Around the fire, we told stories, ghost stories. Mosley Ann laughed to cover up the awkwardness that had settled between us. And then, as the fire crackled and the last embers of daylight began to fade, I heard it, a faint rustling. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the trees were still. My stomach dropped. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The others didn't seem to notice. They were too caught up in the conversation, too distracted to pick up on the subtle shifts in the atmosphere. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, before Jack suddenly stood up. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, he was already heading inside the cabin. The others barely noticed. As Jack entered, I could barely make out his silhouette through the open door. We all stood, motionless, hearts pounding in our chests. "Jack," I called out, my voice barely more than a whisper. No answer. I started toward the door, my feet heavy in the dirt, but Emily grabbed my arm. "No," I shook my head, pulling away. I wasn't leaving without Jack, but Emily was right. "Jack," I yelled, my voice cracking. And then, from within the cabin, I heard it. A slow, deliberate footstep. Not a normal footstep. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I pushed the door open. What I saw in that doorway will stay with me forever. The cabin was empty. There was no sign of Jack, no trace of him. But the air inside was thick. A figure, a person, or was it? It was hunched, its back turned to me, so still I thought for a moment it was just a trick of the light. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, caught in a trance I couldn't break. And then it smiled. The grin was wide, impossibly wide, stretching too far for any human face. It wasn't Jack. It wasn't human. I don't remember running. All I know is I was suddenly outside, gasping for breath, the others pulling me away from the cabin. Jack was never found. We left the jungle the next day, every one of us silent and shaken. We never spoke about the cabin again. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, and maybe next time, it won't let them leave. It started with a whisper. Every night, as the firelight flickered and we settled into our sleeping bags, I would hear Itha's soft, eerie murmur drifting from the trees just beyond the camp's circle of light. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the longer we stayed in the jungle, the clearer it became. The whispers weren't carried by the wind. They were calling, and they were calling my name. I didn't want to admit it at first. Our group of friends had been excited about the camping trip for months. It was supposed to be a bonding experience, getting away from the distractions of school, reconnecting with nature. We had hiked for hours before setting up camp, the weight of our backpacks digging into our shoulders, our excitement growing with every step deeper into the dense, humid jungle. The sound of birds overhead and the occasional rustle of wildlife in the underbrush were the only sounds breaking the stillness of the surroundings. But when I turned to look at my friends, none of them seemed to hear it. Their conversations continued, oblivious to the strange noise that seemed to be coming from the trees. We'd trekked deep into the jungle, far from the beaten path. Our teachers, mostly in the background, just there to make sure we didn't get too reckless. Someone or something was whispering my name. I would hear it as I lay in my sleeping bag, drifting in and out of sleep, my eyes half closed. It wasn't a soft breeze or the rustling of leaves. This was deliberate, a voice that seemed too real to ignore, too clear to be the imagination of someone already on edge in the wilderness. The air was thick, humid, and the shadows from the towering trees stretched long across the ground, like dark fingers reaching for the light. It was just me, now alone with whatever was in the dark. No, this voice was coming from deeper within the jungle, from the shadows just beyond the circle of light. I couldn't hear the voice anymore, but the air felt colder. I tried to convince myself it was just the jungle playing tricks on me, but something inside me kept telling me I wasn't alone. There were 7 of us in total, all students from the same school. It was beautiful, in a way. The jungle seemed alive, full of mystery, but it was also suffocating in its intensity. The voice didn't feel like a prank. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt wrong. The whispers had returned, more insistent this time, louder and closer. I could feel them in the pit of my stomach, like fingers crawling along my spine, as if whatever was whispering knew exactly where I was, knew exactly what I was feeling. Something was out there. Something was waiting. I couldn't stay there anymore. But when I lay there, still and silent, the whispers grew louder, surrounding me. My eyes were glued to the dark tree line, and I felt the weight of the jungle pressing in on me. The whispering was constant now, a low murmur that seemed to be coming from all directions, moving with the wind but not carried by it. My feet moved almost on their own, drawn to the sound. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to find out what was calling me, but it felt like I didn't have a choice. Something was pulling me closer. The whispers were personal, urgent, and they knew my name. But then the voice came again, softer this time, but unmistakable. We set up camp near a small clearing, the fire crackling as we gathered around it, swapping stories and jokes. I looked around the camp again, but my friends were still asleep, unaware of the terror creeping in around us. It wasn't even something I could describe. It was a shape, a thing with no clear form, its edges blurring in and out of the darkness. The shadows in the trees were alive now, reaching toward me, calling me. The whispering wasn't just in the air, it was in my mind. I felt my sanity begin to slip, the edges of my vision fraying as I stared at the thing in front of me. and shift in the dark, the shadows dancing like living things. And every time I close my eyes, I hear the whispers, again soft, insistent, and always calling my name. I glanced around the camp, looking for some sign that one of my friends was awake, that maybe it was just one of them trying to scare me. I didn't stop until I was back in the center of the camp, gasping for breath, my body shaking uncontrollably. But everyone else was still asleep, completely undisturbed. And then I saw a shadow moving between the trees, shifting like it wasn't quite solid. It felt safe, surrounded by the flickering glow of the fire. The warmth it provided a stark contrast to the cool, damp night that settled in around us. But as the night wore on, the forest seemed to change. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as I moved further into the trees. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, straining to hear anything else. The whispers didn't come again, but the air remained thick with an oppressive tension, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. The whispers stopped, replaced by the sound of something or someone moving through the brush. I could hear it breathing now, low and heavy, coming closer. That's when I first heard the whisper. It was faint at first, like someone calling from a distance, just outside the reach of the firelight. I thought it was just my imagination, probably just the wind, I muttered to myself, shaking it off. But as the night deepened, the whispering grew louder. It wasn't just the wind. No, it was clear now. The first time it happened, I sat up in alarm, scanning the trees. The others were fast asleep, their breathing steady. The second night, it happened again. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard it clear as day. Ethan, I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. My name. But it was not coming from one of my friends. I sat up in my sleeping bag, trying to convince myself that I was hearing things. Ethan, come closer. I shivered, pulling the covers tighter around me, my eyes darting nervously to the trees, which seemed to sway. I wanted to call out to them, wake them up, tell them about the voice. But something stopped me. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but sleep didn't come. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I had to be hearing things. Ethan. The voice was closer now, so close it was as if it were right next to me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. My heart was racing as I sat up in my sleeping bag, sweat beading on my forehead. I had to get up. I slipped out of my sleeping bag, my feet hitting the cold earth as I silently moved toward the edge of the campfire light. Ethan, over here. I took a hesitant step toward the darkness, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I stepped past the firelight, into the shadowy edge of the jungle. The air felt different, here thicker, colder. And then I heard something else, a crackling sound, like dry leaves being crushed underfoot. My heart stopped. I wasn't alone. I turned sharply, scanning the darkness. Ethan. The voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a clear, guttural sound, as though something was speaking directly into my ear. I froze, my blood running cold. It wasn't human. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow retreated, vanishing back into the trees. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed with fear, but when I finally managed to move, I ran. The others were still asleep, unaware of what had just happened. I never told anyone about the whispers. We left the jungle the next morning, no one the wiser about what had happened during the night. But I knew, they're still out there, waiting for me to return. And next time, I'm not so sure I'll be able to resist.